Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me. My name's Paige, and welcome to Podnalysis, a series where we take a closer look at articles, videos, speeches, and more. In today's episode, we're going to dive into a TED Talk all about feminism called We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. If you haven't had the time to give it a watch, no need to worry. We Should All Be Feminists is an amazing TED Talk given by a wonderful lady who speaks very passionately, while cracking a few jokes, of course, about the subject of feminism. Adichie is an award-winning Nigerian writer, well known for her novel Purple Hibiscus, and even her TED Talk was actually published into a book. Adichie takes us on a journey as she discusses many instances from her life in Nigeria, along with bringing up many aspects of female Nigerian culture. In all of her stories and connections, with the help of some noteworthy quotes and facts, help express her desire and reasoning for why everyone should be a feminist, and why feminism, as a whole, needs a rebrand. Of course, if you want to watch the video, I'll link it down below. Alright, I think it's time to begin. Let's start things off simple, by looking at the thesis of the speech. From my interpretation, Adichie's personal experiences, societal analysis, and understanding of feminism ultimately leads to her belief that it's necessary to progress to a society where gender equality is innate for future generations to come. If I had to categorize this TED Talk into an essay, I would have to say it would be persuasive, because she convinces the audience that there is a need for change regarding feminism. Adichie makes historical references throughout her speech. For example, she references the Lilly Ledbetter Law and explains that there's a focus on a man and a woman doing the same job, being equally qualified, and the man being paid more because he's a man. The reference helps to exemplify that we live in a world filled with dominant men and how this has been an ongoing problem. Adichie refers to reliable people to add ethos or credibility behind her topic. She quotes the late Kenyan Nobel Peace Laureate Wangari Maathai in that the higher you go, the fewer women there are. With ethos, Adichie can persuade the audience because she supports her beliefs using an authoritative and highly credible figure. As well, Adichie herself is credible and trustworthy, as she's a woman and an award-winning author, which qualifies her to express her beliefs, ideology, and desire for change. Adichie includes factual and logical information, a method known as logos, to back up her argument. Mentioning that 52% of the world's population is female allows audience members to understand the extent of this problem because numbers often help put things into perspective and, in turn, help people see the truth behind her argument. She also makes many logical arguments. For example, she says, some people will bring up evolutionary biology and apes, how, female apes bow down to male apes and that sort of thing. But the point is, we're not apes. Using logic, especially on such simple terms, persuades the audience to say, hey, that makes sense, and then agree with her beliefs. Adichie also shares anecdotes to appeal to the audience's emotions, a method known as pathos. She says, I really wanted to wear my shiny lip gloss and my girly skirt, but I decided not to. Instead, I wore a very serious, very manly and ugly suit. Sharing a story about needing to look less feminine to be respected makes the audience feel sorry for Adichie and helps them recognize the severity of these issues. Even when Adichie decided to use her own money to leave a tip, the man turned to her friend Louis and said, "Thank you, sir." Through anecdotes just like this one, Adichie shows how women aren't thought of as equals to men, exemplifying the struggles women face. And through the telling of her own stories, Adichie persuades the audience by making them feel apologetic and upset in order to get them to agree with her argument. Adichie uses different methods to help develop her main idea. Using first-person narration allows Adichie to be able to include stories from her past to help persuade the audience of gender inequality and why everyone should be a feminist. For example, she says, I walked into a lobby of one of the best Nigerian hotels, and a guard at the entrance stopped me and asked me annoying questions, because their automatic assumption is that a Nigerian female walking into a hotel alone is a sex worker. Narrating her personal stories about being treated unfairly in society allows audience members to understand the struggles of gender inequality through life experiences. I just wanted to add that, as a 17-year-old, I haven't really had an opportunity to experience this treatment of gender inequality, but now that I've heard Adishi's point of view, I'm definitely going to read situations differently moving forward. Adishi also follows the cause and effect format. Adishi tells an anecdote about how even though she received the highest mark in the grade, her teacher said that the monitor had to be a boy. Adishi uses anecdotes to show the effects of sexism through her life. In her anecdotes, typically, the cause is gender inequality and female discrimination, which as a result affects Adishi and many other women through lack of opportunity, unfair treatment, disrespect, and in this case, not being able to be the class monitor. Another example is when her friend Okoloma said to her, "You know you're a feminist, right?" This anecdote also shows how the cause, in this case the negative stigma towards feminists, affected Adishi enough to be the reason behind her entire argument. So the combination of both the cause and effect format and first-person narrative allows Adishi to express how she's been affected by sexism through real-life stories. Now, let's analyze some of the many stylistic elements that helped improve the engagement and written work of Adishi's speech. I'll start with her body language and facial expressions. Throughout her speech, Adishi stood strong and still behind the podium, demonstrating that she stands proudly and confidently behind her ideas, beliefs, experiences, and arguments. She also incorporates occasional hand movements, such as air quotes when saying Western books, which makes her speech seem a lot more conversational and natural. As well, Adishi uses different facial expressions. She often smiles as she tells a joke, allowing the audience to find amusement in her words, and appears to look more serious when speaking about gender inequality issues. This helps audience members understand the different moods of her speech and how they should react to her words and stay engaged. The lighting also helps enhance the engagement of the speech, since the dark red curtains and furniture hidden in the shadows contrast the bright light on Adishi, helping bring attention to her and not her surroundings. Adishi also used various tones, such as joyful when attempting to amuse the audience and more serious when discussing feminism issues. For example, she speaks with a happy tone when she says, "I did it for the peace in my marriage," as she jokingly explains that women shouldn't be doing anything in the first place. However, she quickly shifts to a more serious and low tone as she explains how women give up their careers, dreams, and opportunities for the peace in their marriage. Again, by doing this, Adishi avoids being monotone and helps the audience member stay engaged by the contrasting feelings she expresses. To dig even deeper into this analysis, let's examine some of the codes and conventions Adishi used to aid in the communication of her speech. Adishi's pacing and pauses were very effective. Her constant pace gave audience members enough time to process the messages she was saying, but she also added effective pauses or moments of silence to add a more drastic effect or emphasis on something she wanted listeners to pay more attention to. For example, Adishi added a pause after asking the audience the question, "Now, what if she saw her husband changing their baby's diaper as perfectly normal?" Leaving a moment of silence after her question before continuing gives the audience enough time to reflect and think about what was just said. Adishi's diction was another effective convention used in her speech for two reasons. The first is that, given the topic of feminism, her diction is quite informal, making her speech seem more conversational, inviting, and even relatable for some people. The informality also allows her to include anecdotes as well as personal opinions. The second reason is that through her diction, Adishi avoids words that may result in additional arguments like misogyny or radical. Instead, she says, "Gender is not an easy conversation to have. For both men and women, to bring up gender sometimes encounters almost immediate resistance." By doing that, her speech not only targets both men and women, but also helps avoid the idea that feminism is exclusive to females, which may lead to further arguments. Adishi also uses stereotypes to help audience members understand why gender inequality is wrong. For example, Adishi brings up the idea that women must be homely or do the cooking. Using stereotypes gives women something to relate to and helps the audience understand why female stereotypes need to be changed. Speaking of stereotypes, I actually remember an incident in my fitness class, which was made up of mostly boys. I remember them telling me that because I'm a girl, I'm weak and that I was decent, for being a girl. Thinking back on Adishi's stereotypes about women, I now understand why she is so adamant about changing them. Even if these boys didn't realize it, they were putting me down for my gender, almost as if it's been ingrained in their minds to do that. I was recommended to read an article by the New York Times called Feminism Lost, Now What? By Susan Chira. And no wonder it was recommended to me. Both the article and Adishi's speech discussed the idea of male dominance in power positions and the concept of rebranding what it means to be a feminist. In both the speech and the article, it's clear that men still have more dominance in positions of power. Adishi explains that while more women walk the earth, most of the positions of power and prestige are occupied by men. The article helps to support the idea as well. As Chira explains, the cabinet that Donald J. Trump has nominated includes men and a few women with public records hostile to a range of issues at the heart of a women's movement. Both show that while we recognize that women aren't given equal opportunities to have positions of power, it's still a huge problem that is yet to change completely. The article and speech also recognizes the need to rebrand the definition of feminism. In Adishi's speech, she tells an anecdote about an argument she had with her friend Okoloma, where she was called a feminist. She explains, this claim was not a compliment, and that she could tell by his tone that you would use to say something like, you're a supporter of terrorism. She later continues and uses her speech to redefine what it means to be a feminist, stripping away the negative stigma seen by many. Chira also expresses that to solve this problem, the answer, some argue, is rebranding feminism. This shows that the article has a similar view to Adishi, in the sense that they both agree that rebranding feminism may be the only way to see real change. As someone whose vocabulary is quite limited, I found that reading the article was challenging at times. So to help you out, I thought I'd share my own strategy for encountering new words. For example, when reading, I struggled to understand what the word bristle meant. My first step is to reread the sentence a few times to try to figure out what the word may mean given the context. And if that doesn't work, the next step is to read the paragraph over again. And since I found myself still questioning the meaning of the word, my next step would be to search for the definition. And with that, I actually learned that bristle is another word for angry. My final step is to go back to the article and read the sentence over, now knowing what the word means. And I find this method to be very effective because trying to figure out a word before searching it up helps me remember the meaning for the future. So, with that being said, it looks like I'm running out of time. Even though in places like North America, we're seeing women's equality improving with things like Me Too movements and improving pay equity, there are still countries and cultures all around the world who continue to treat women unequally. And even we need to continue to make changes. I think we've learned today about the importance of feminism and how it's time to break down the stigma in order for everyone to live equally, and I really do believe that we all should be feminists. But before I go, I thought I would leave you all with one of the most memorable lines from the TED Talk.
A feminist is a man or a woman who says, yes, there's a problem with gender as it is today, and we must fix it. We must do better.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you tune in next time to Podnalysis.